Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to show you the techniques that I use to create this Father's Day scrapbook page. You can use those same techniques to create your own artwork. So let's get started. Let's start with a new document. We have a 12 by 12 inch document opened. Let's get a background. I'm in the backgrounds panel over here. Let's grab this one. I want a dark background. I'm going to use this night sky. Let's just click and drag it and drop it right in our artwork. And that will apply that background to our artwork. Now I want to make a banner. Let's get the rectangular marquee tool. That's this one up here. Make sure you're on the rectangle and just click and drag in our artwork. Let's go something about like that. Now I want to fill that with a tan color. But I want to do that on a new layer. I don't want to put that on our background layer. So let's click the new layer icon button up here. Let's fill that with a tan color. Click on our foreground color. And let's get a tan color. Let's go something a little bit lighter than that. Something like that. I like that. Click OK. Now we can get the paint bucket. We got our new layer selected. Just click right inside of that marquee and that fills that marquee with our color. Command D or Control D to deselect that. Command T or Control T to bring up our corner handles. These little squares around the outside are called handles. And with those handles you can click and drag or move things around, scale it, and we can rotate it. So if you move your cursor up here to the corner, it turns into a curved double-headed arrow. Click and drag and you can just rotate that around where we need it. Click the check mark. Get the move tool. This is the move tool up here. If you select that, now we can move that into position. We'll just bring it right over here in the corner to something like that. Now I want to put some type in here, so let's get the type tool. Let's select a blue color. So come down here, click on the color swatch, and it opens up the color swatches here. If you click on this icon, it'll open up the color picker. And if you move your cursor into your artwork, it turns into an eyedropper. Let's just pick one of these darker blue colors down here. Click OK. And now let's click in our artwork and let's type. Best Dad Ever, Father's Day 2021. Click the check mark. Now we can rotate that the same way we did our banner. Come up here right in the corner. It turns into a double-headed arrow. Let's rotate that around. Click the check mark to accept that. Slide that up here into place a little bit better. Select your type tool. Let's select Best Dad Ever. I want to make that a little bit bigger. So let's come down here and with your cursor, just hover over the word size and your cursor turns into a hand with a double-headed arrow. Click and drag to the right. We can just do this to where it looks good. Something about like that. Now let's do the same thing with Father's Day 2021. That can be a little bit smaller, bigger than it is now, but smaller than Best Dad Ever. It looks like we need to change the leading. That's the space between the lines. So we can do the same thing. Come over here over leading and click and drag. Slide that down a little bit to where it looks good, and I think something like that. Let's go ahead and make Best Dad Ever just a little bit bigger. Select that and make it just a little bit bigger. Something like that. Let's get the move tool and we'll just kind of move it around where we want it. Something like that. I like that. Let's bring in some shapes. I'm going to come over here to the shapes panel and I'm going to find a shape. This is going to be the background for our picture. I'm going to use these shapes right here. Let's bring in this shape. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And we'll adjust this a little bit later. We'll adjust the size. I want to straighten it out just a little bit. Let's click on the check mark. I want to make it this tan color, so let's click on the foreground color. It opens the color picker. Move into our artwork and our cursor turns into an eyedropper. Click on that tan color. Now our tan color is selected again. Click OK. Get the paint bucket. Click on that shape. And that colors it that tan color. Let's bring in another shape. This is the shape that I'm going to put our picture on. Let's bring in this shape right here. It's hard to see it because when it came in, it colored it our tan color. Let's color it black. Let's just switch the foreground and background color. Now black is our foreground color. Grab the paint bucket, click on that. Now we can see what we've got. Click on the move tool. Let's just drag these corner handles out. We'll make this a little bit bigger. How big do we want the picture? I'm going to go something like that. Click the check mark. Now let's bring in our picture. Come down here to the photo bin. Here's our picture. Let's drag it in. It comes in right on top. Let's move it over above our shape. Now I want to make this bigger than our shape. So I'm going to just drag these handles out. Our shape is kind of rotated a little bit, so I'm going to rotate this picture just a little bit to match that shape. Something like that. Let's make sure that I'm covering the whole shape. Something like that. Click the check mark. Now I want to put that picture on our shape. I'm going to do that by clipping it. If I clip this picture to the shape, that means that the pixels on this picture will only show up where there are pixels on this shape. And you can do that by holding down the Option on a Mac or the Alt on the PC. And if you bring your cursor right in between those two layers, it turns into a square with an arrow pointing down. Click right there. The pixels in our picture are only visible where there are pixels on this layer, this shape layer. And with the move tool, you can move that around just a little bit. You can come right off of our shape if we move it too far. So I want to make sure that I'm still on the shape. I think that looks good. Let's leave it right there. Now I want to make that tan background shape just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to click on that layer and then I'm going to pull these handles out and adjust it until I get it the way I like it. Something like that. Click the check mark. Now I want to bring in a border down here in the bottom, and I'm going to use the shapes again. So let's come down here and grab, I'm going to use this shape right here. Let's pull that in. Now there's a couple of things I can do with this. I can duplicate this layer, Command J or Control J, and if I hold down the Shift, I can move this over, and it'll stay on the same horizontal plane, and I can line that up, and I can just mix and match them and go all the way across. I'm not going to do that. Let's throw that away. I'm going to actually stretch this, and I'm going to do that by pulling on this middle handle right here. I'm going to click and drag that out and stretch that out. I'm going to go past the border of our artwork, make it a little bit bigger, out to about here. And you can see this side is out here. Okay, I'm going to click the check mark. To accept that, I want to color that same tan color. So let's switch our foreground and background color. We have that tan color in there now. Let's get the paint bucket. Just click on that shape. And there's our border shape down across the bottom. Now I want to duplicate that. So make sure that that layer is selected. Hit Command J or Control J if you're on a PC, and that makes a duplicate of that layer. Grab your Move tool, and let's just move that up. I'm going to move it up and over, just offset it just a little bit, something like that. I like that. Okay, now I want to put that right in the middle. You can see the middle handles right there. Let's select both of our layers. Let's draw a guide so we can find our exact middle. You can do that by coming up under View, New Guide, and we'll just hit 50%. That puts that guide right smack in the middle. Now I've got both of our layers selected, so this middle handle, the middle squares, That's right in the middle of both of our border shapes. So all I need to do is use the arrow keys, hold down the shift, and they'll move 10 pixels at a time, and just nudge that over right into the middle. Perfect. Now you can see it's centered. See how this is centered? It looks the same as that. It's centered in there perfectly. I want to have some space over here to do some journaling, but this is pretty dark to write over, so I want to lighten that up just a little bit. I'm going to do that by using a shape. Let's go back to our shapes panel and find a shape. Let's drag in a shape, maybe this one. Let's make that a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. Something like that. Let's fill that with white. Click on the check mark. You can change these to the default black and white by just clicking on the D, or you can click on this little icon right here. If you click on D, that changes it to black and white. If you click on the X, that's the same as using this arrow. That toggles your background and foreground color back and forth, switches them out. So I want to fill this with white, so I got white. Let's grab the paint bucket, click in there. That's white, but that's too bright. I don't really want that to be white. I just want it to be lighter, a lighter version of the background color. So I'm going to use a blending mode with that. So with that layer selected, let's come up here and let's look at overlay, and let's look at soft light. I like soft light a little bit better. Overlay looks a little more intense, maybe a little more almost a neon. I don't want that. I just want to go soft light. Now, if that's not light enough, all you need to do is Command J or Control J to duplicate that layer. With it on there twice, you've doubled up that effect. And if that's a little too much, you can change the opacity. Hover your cursor over the word opacity and it turns into a hand with a double-headed arrow, just like it did when we were changing the size of our type. You can drag that opacity up or down. So by using multiple layers, changing the opacity, you can get any look that you want. Now I want to put some lines in here to show our journaling. So let's get the type tool. Let's change this to black. Let's take our size down a little bit to, let's go about 15, 13, somewhere in there. That's fine. Let's change our leading. Take our leading down. We'll go about 25. Okay, perfect. We'll click and drag inside of our shape to make a text box. Oh, well look, it selected our shape. Let's just click cancel on that. Let's just come up here and select a different layer. Now we can click and drag our text box. And we'll make sure that we got left justified, and we'll start typing. Hold down the shift. I'm just going to type the underscore. You can actually type your journaling in here if you want, or you can put in the lines. If you put in the lines, that gives you a chance to write in your own handwriting after you get your scrapbook page printed. Makes it a little more personal. Okay, perfect. Click the check mark. Now I want to bring in some other shapes. I'm going to look for a certain star shape that I like. This one right here, I'm going to use this one. I don't want it to be black. I'm going to make it this same tan color. So click on your foreground color. Let's move your cursor into the artwork and just click on this tan color. And that sets your tan color as the foreground color. Click OK. Let's get the paint bucket, click on that shape, and our star is now tan. Let's get the move tool. Now this area in here is actually transparent. If I slide this down, you can see the picture coming through it. I don't want that. I want that to be white. So let's zoom in a little bit. Command and the plus sign, or Control and the plus sign. Hold down the space bar and you get the hand, and you can just move that down here so you can see it a little bit better. Let's grab the polygonal lasso tool. Click, and you can see the polygonal lasso tool creates straight lines. So we can just click. Make sure you're within the tan area. and just click your way right around that star. When you get back to the beginning point, you'll get a little circle, a little 0 down in the lower right corner of your cursor. There it is right there. That means you're at your beginning point. You can just click right there and that will close up that selection. Now let's make a new layer. I want to make sure this layer is underneath our tan star layer. I'm going to fill that with white. So I can do that by changing that color to white and using the paint bucket, but I'm going to use a different technique. I'm going to push the shift and the delete, or shift and backspace, and that brings up the fill layer dialog box. And we already have white there. You have different choices here. I'm going to pick white, click OK, and that fills that with white. Command D or Control D will deselect that selection. Let's zoom back out. Command 0 or Control 0, if you're on a PC, will fit that in the window. Now let's go ahead and group those together. Hold down the shift and select both of those layers. Hit Command G or Control G, or you can also hit this icon up here and that will group it together. We'll just call that star. I want to make some duplicates of that star, so with that group selected, I'm going to hit Command J or Control J if you're on a PC, and I'm going to do it twice. That'll give me 3 stars. Let's get the Move tool. We'll move one over here, and I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller just by dragging one of these handles. Click the check mark. This other one, I'm going to slide down this way, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller as well. Something like that. Now we have a group of 3, and I like this that it's overlapping that picture. That's going to be cool. Click the check mark. We're pretty much done. What I want to do is add some layer styles to give this some pop. Let's start with this type layer up here. Select the type layer. Let's come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's give this a stroke. And I'm going to make it just a small stroke, about 5 pixels. I want this to be white, so let's click on this color swatch. Let's choose white. You can do that just by bringing your cursor over here into this top corner and just drag all the way right up to the top. And that creates solid white. Click OK. Now let's give that a little bit of a drop shadow. Click on the drop shadow. This determines the angle of your shadow, and I like my shadow to come from the upper left. That puts the shadow on the lower right. I think that looks best. Distance determines the distance from our type. The shadow is going to show up. You see if I go way over here, how far I go. If you go too far, your shadow is completely off of your artwork, so you don't want to go too far. I'm just going to go about right there. Size determines how soft your shadow is. There's a real hard shadow. Or you can go to the right and it becomes a real soft shadow. It almost disappears. It's so soft. Let's bring that up. Let's bring it about right there, and let's darken it up just a little bit. You can do that with opacity. Make it a little bit darker, and I think that's okay. Click OK. Now I'm going to just copy that to some of these other elements. Let's copy that to our banner. Hold down the Option or the Alt if you're on a PC. Click on that FX and hold down the mouse button and drag it down to that other layer. And that puts that same effect on that banner layer. We can keep going, do the same thing. Let's do our border ribbon down here. Option or Alt, and just drag it up. We'll drag it up to both of those layers. Okay, let's do our stars. So you can put the layer effect on these groups as well. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and try it on our picture layer. You don't want the picture itself. You want the shape that the picture's sitting on. So let's drag that up onto that shape. I don't really like the white border around these kind of splotchy shapes. So I'm going to double click on that FX That opens up our style settings again, and I'm going to get rid of that stroke. I like the drop shadow. On this one, I'm going to actually add a bevel. This will kind of give it an embossed effect. Slide this slide up. You can go too far. You can make it look crazy. I don't want to go that far. I just want it to be kind of subtle. Something like that. Let's click OK. Now let's copy that to these other shape layers. Hold down the Option or the Alt. Let's go down to this shape. And let's put that effect on our journaling shapes, which are these two over here. I'm looking at it and I don't think I like the embossed effect on those. So let's double click on that FX. Turn off the emboss. Same with this one. Turn off the emboss. I'm going to turn it off on that background tan layer too. Turn off the emboss. I'll just have the emboss on that picture layer. I kind of like that. I think we're done. Now you want to save that as a PSD or Photoshop file. That will save all of these layers. So if you ever want to go back in and make any changes, you can, because you'll have all of these layers. Then also save a copy as a JPEG, and the JPEG will flatten all of those layers, and that'll make a much smaller file, and that's the one you want to print from. We went through a lot of techniques that you can use in your own artwork. If you learned anything new, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for joining me in this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.